That's what had people say, you know what, if it can happen in Tunisia, if it can happen in Egypt, it can happen here too. Now, of course, nobody told them if you're in the background of Saudi Arabia, you probably shouldn't make that expectation. So that's what happened. And then mid-March, of course, we had the crackdown. Saudi Arabia, UAE sent in troops into Bahrain in the name of the GCC forces, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Of course, in Libya, you had armies going in to help the Libyans. In Bahrain, you had armies going in to help the government. What the government of Bahrain did, of course, people were very active online. The first thing they did was, of course, they set up a Facebook page and they set up a Twitter page. Now, the reason why we think it's still government is because of the way it was conducted. What they did is they took pictures from the protests that people had taken. They would enlarge the faces of people in those pictures, put a red circle around it and say, please identify. And then people who worked with that person at work or someone who knew them as a friend would then identify the person, where they work, how old they were, and so on. And then that person would get checked off after they get arrested. So they basically launched an online campaign of targeting people that they wanted to arrest. Now, since the crackdown in mid-March, we've had around 1,500 people arrested. The Bahrain Center for Human Rights has so far been able to document around 800 cases of severe torture. Now, we expect that the number is much, much larger. We just don't have the capacity.
Some, in some other Arab countries, some advances, maybe it would have had more success and less of a blackout on the media, and even especially in the Arab world, because I think the battle is getting support for Bahrain within the Arab world, because Arab intellectuals and Arab thinkers and Arab journalists are the ones letting you down more than anybody else. Thank you.
I think that the timing is important, but I was expecting it to come earlier, honestly. I was going like, well, Bahrain has the perfect situation for a revolution. But then I was like, oh, they're taking so long, and then I saw February 14th. The thing with that is, I think it came at the perfect timing, because Arab governments, they all share the same handbook, and I don't know if it's Gaddafi's Green Handbook or another one, but they all share the same handbook, and they all learn from each other. And as you can see, the same kind of internet counter campaign that the Bahraini government led, you're seeing the same thing in Syria. They all learn from each other. The same thing that you saw that the Bahraini state TV doing with the spreading sectarianism, you're seeing in Egypt now between the Muslims and the Kurds. And the same thing in Yemen. So
that took place in Bahrain. The opposition did not participate. A Shia member was elected into the parliament. My question is, where do we go from here? What's the next step? Clearly, there's a huge PR campaign taking place on both sides. I feel in the end that the Bahrainis are losing, and we all want Bahrain to progress. In your opinion, what is the best way forward? What should happen ideally for this tension to lessen, at least?
I think that within the Bahraini situation, and probably amongst the other revolutions as well, there isn't a win and lose situation. Everyone's losing. We're losing lives, we're losing people who are being tortured, we're losing people who are being put in prison. Even if we reach a point where the Bahraini government falls, and you have a new democratic government, we'll still have lost, because we have lost it was a very high price to pay. What I think can happen realistically, ideally, it would be international pressure on the Bahraini government to stop human rights violations. That's the ideal situation. I don't really see that happening right now. What I do see happening is putting pressure on the Bahraini government to take 5 trust-building steps, because without those 5 trust-building steps between the government and the people of Bahrain, we're not going to see, sorry about that. Sorry. Probably. So without these 5 trust-building steps, we're not going to see any kind of reconciliation between the opposition and the government. These 5 trust-building steps is 1, the complete withdrawal of the GCC forces, because they're seen by the Bahraini people as being an occupational force and as being a drive behind the hardliners of the royal family. 2, to stop attacking protesters on the streets using excessive force, because people need to be able to practice that right of assembly. 3, to release all political prisoners with dropping the charges, because so far they release people but they don't drop the charges. And also, it cannot come in the form of a royal pardon. The Bahraini royal family or the regime needs to realize people are citizens, not subjects. The king doesn't decide when people go to prison and when they get released. He doesn't have that right. So he doesn't have the right to come out and say a royal pardon. People get released because they have the right to be free. The fourth thing is the reinstating people into their jobs. Around 2,700 people have been fired from their jobs for going out and demanding their constitutional rights. And the fifth and last thing would be accountability. I mean, the Bahrain Center for Human Rights has already put out a report where we spoke about how 5 members of the royal family were directly involved in acts of torture. The king's 2 sons, the crown prince's younger brothers, Khalid and Nasser, they were directly involved in torture, according to testimonies that we've been able to get from victims. So there needs to be some sort of accountability. So far, even at the very bottom of the chain, the very normal officers at the bottom of the security forces, there's been absolutely no accountability.